Hello, everybody. So good to see all of you here. My name is Leon Wolf, as the disembodied voice just told you. I took over RedState for Eric Erickson this year, and although we are sad to have him gone, we're excited about the things that we have to come in the future, and we're especially delighted that you all came out to join us for the 8th annual RedState gathering that we're having this year in Denver, Colorado. How about the weather that we're having this year as compared to previous years at the gatherings, right? Isn't it nice to not have it be 105 degrees outside when you walk out at 8 o'clock in the morning? So it's great. We're glad to be here in the city of Denver. Want to encourage all you guys, while you're here, to spend some time in the gathering hall out there and talk to our sponsors. They're the people who are responsible for us being able to have this year after year at the prices that we're able to offer to you. So stop by, talk to them, view their materials, go to their websites, check them out. They're all great friends of RedState, and we stand behind what they say. Speaking of that, we're delighted to have a lot of great sponsors this year. But we had, I believe, only one sponsor that has been with us since the very first RedState gathering that we had back in Atlanta, Georgia. I believe they were our one sponsor that we had for the first RedState gathering in Atlanta, Georgia back in 2009. They've been with us every year since then. I've had a lot of personal friends who have come through and worked for this great organization, and they're back again supporting us this year, and we're delighted to have them be a part of this event. We're delighted to have them doing the work that they do on the behalf of the conservative movement out there in the country. And it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker, who is the CEO of FreedomWorks, Adam Brandon. Please welcome Adam to the stage, guys.
Thanks very much. So first, I just want to say the reason that we keep sponsoring RedState, there's a lot of different groups and events that we could sponsor, but we've found as an organization, the people who read RedState tend to be more active. And also personally, I find that when I want to read something interesting on an issue and not just be told what I already know, there's no better place to start than going to RedState. So it's always a privilege to be here. I wanted to start off with, I was thinking before I got up here, what's the best thing I've heard all year? And the last time I spoke was right before at an event at the Republican convention in Cleveland. And I'm from Cleveland. And that morning, I was listening to one of my local sports talk show hosts, and they were talking about how Cleveland State and Case Western Reserve were being interrupted for the Republican convention. But don't worry, students, because if you hear something that was offending you, they were going to keep the universities open for safe spaces. And they were debating this, and I'm getting ready, and then this guy calls in, and he was an elderly Clevelander, and he says, you know, a few years ago, my college was interrupted, and they sent me to a safe space, and it was called the Pacific. And I thought that kind of was a great, in a nutshell, of what we're battling today between people who do their duty, fight for this country, and I've been thinking about that vet a lot, because I'm trying to make sure the country's living up to the standards that he laid out when he went, and a lot of his friends didn't come back. Versus, we can't say anything to offend you on a college campus, and we're going to create a safe space. So I'm deeming this now a conservative safe space for the next, how many days? I've got a few comments I'd like to make, run through them in about 5-7 minutes, and then I'd love to take a couple of questions. So if you've got a question for me, start thinking about it. I actually do want to begin this on bad news. I'm sorry to say the last week our movement had a big setback, and it's just not getting the attention it needs. But one of our best congressmen, Tim Huelskamp, lost his election last week. And the reason I want to point that out is, how many of you have heard of the House Freedom Caucus in this room? Well, that's good. I think last year almost no one has heard about it. But our best allies in the House, that's where they are. And what I'm really scared about is, with all the focus at the top of the ticket, slowly but surely, every one of our best allies has a target on their back, and they're getting picked off. And Huelskamp should be a wake-up call to everyone in this room about the seriousness of this election cycle. Because if Donald Trump wins, the House Freedom Caucus are the people that'll shepherd in his good pieces of legislation and stop his bad pieces of legislation. If Hillary Clinton wins, it's going to be the House Freedom Caucus that's laying down in front of the train tracks to try and stop her agenda. Either way, We desperately need to have this bunch of House conservatives. And if we don't have their back, they are slowly going to get picked off. And when you think about the agenda that Hillary Clinton's going to be bringing, what I'm terrified of is that you'll have a Republican leadership that will be scared, and the lessons they'll take of this election is we've just got to go right up to the White House and make a deal. And if we're going to make those deals, we spend a lot of time talking about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. I want to warn everyone that I think the other amendment that's under threat right now is the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment's corollary is Article 1. So the 10th Amendment basically says, here's the feds, here's the states. And Article 1 basically says, here's Congress, here's the executive branch. And I am so scared under the next presidency that all this power is going to start to be centralized to a point where it's going to be hard to get back with the regulators, with the bureaucracy, particularly with the presidency. And if we lose the House Freedom Caucus, I'm thinking there's not going to be too many people left to fight for the 10th Amendment and Article 1. So please keep that in mind. The good news is Speaker Boehner has been replaced by a guy named Warren Davidson, who I'm very excited about. So the congressman who's replacing Speaker Boehner is going to be a member of the House Freedom Caucus. So you lost Huelskamp, but you did have a victory. Dave Bratt, one of my favorite congressmen, the guy who took out Eric Cantor, he doesn't have a challenger. So he's surviving a very important election. But between now and early August and the end of the month, there's 3 elections I want you to pay attention to, 2 of which are in Arizona. Congressman Gosar, great guy. Right after Huelskamp got defeated, Chamber of Commerce and other money's flown into Arizona to take him out. If they succeed in taking out 2 of our best guys, we're in big trouble. If you're from Florida or know people in Florida, there's a fantastic woman by the name of Mary Thomas who's running in Florida. And then finally, Andy Biggs in Arizona. Those are going to be 3 bellwether House races that I hope you have on your radar going forward. And this is our beachhead with the House Freedom Caucus and these guys. If we lose them, boy, we're in trouble. So with that, I wanted to also just kind of switch to something I've been thinking about. And as you're talking about the future, I'm just hoping at this conference you don't spend too much time focusing on this presidential race and think about what November is going to start to look like. I kind of made a list of our strengths and our weaknesses. And just think, and our strengths are solid. We've got a House Freedom Caucus. We've got people like Cruz and Lee and Paul in the Senate. And that's more people elected than I remember in a long time. We've got a very passionate activist base. Just look at the folks here in this room. We are so strong at the state level, and you're going to hopefully speakers will be bringing up these victories that the conservative and libertarian movement's been having at the state level. We're probably so focused on federal, we're forgetting about all the great work that's happening back in the states. Truth's on our side, which you can't discount that when you're actually right on policies. And then finally, one of the reasons I love RedState is disruption in the media. We no longer need the New York Times to be reporting to us on what the issues are. Those are our strengths. But as you're listening to the speakers, here's 6 things we need to improve upon, and then I'd love to take some questions. Number 1, guys, we're bad at messaging. We're selling freedom, and we can't sell freedom. We really have to think about that. And we have to improve upon that in the next cycle. Number 2, part of being bad on messaging, we're terrible storytellers. When you think about how the Obama economy is grinding down individuals, the left is very good at showing people who have been victims of whatever. We're not very good at showing victims of big government. And I think messaging, and the big part of that is storytelling, is something we need to focus on. Number 3, did you ever realize it always seems like we're anti-everything? Well, the reason that I think we're anti-everything is we're kind of pulling back a little bit. And when the other side is setting the agenda and you're reacting to their agenda, you're always going to be anti. So that leads to my next thing. Does anyone here remember when Obama first ran The Life of Julia? And if you don't realize, The Life of Julia was from when Julia was born till she died, It was a complete vision of what the Obama administration would do for her. What I'm hoping coming out of like RedState, what is our complete vision? Because once we have our complete vision, then it's going to be a lot easier to sell our messaging and explain, and then we're not anti-everything. It's like, hey, look at this vision. And two last things. One thing, this comes from Mike Lee's chief of staff, Boyd Matheson, because when Mike Lee's chief of staff retired, I asked him, how's FreedomWorks helping or hurting? And he said, one thing as a movement we have to be very careful of is he was washing his hair, and he called me after he washed his hair, and he's like, I'm staring at the shampoo bottle, and I saw the problem. Lather, rinse, repeat. We spend so much time ginning up for these battles. We're going to fight Obamacare, and then we lost that. Okay, now we're going to fight the budget, and we get all excited, and then we lose that. And then we just keep doing this. We need to be showing victories. I guess this is a long way of saying we need to be more strategic as a movement. And I go back to these state battles. We're kicking butt at the state level. Maybe that's where we start sharing our stories. And then finally, this is something that I've had to learn, which is a little bit more of patience. There are no silver bullets to these challenges that we're facing. And we can't expect that one member is going to go and solve all of our problems overnight. And what we need is we need everyone in this room to stay involved in this movement no matter what happens in the fall. Because the only way I can guarantee you we're going to lose is if people just start saying, you know what, the debt's too big and this. Remember I said we have truth on our side? So that's kind of what I'm going to implore everyone here is as you're looking forward, start thinking about what we're going to be doing in the future, this vision, that type of stuff. I think that's how we're going to be, that's the only way we're going to win in the long run. And so with that, I think I only have a couple more minutes, but I'd love to take a question or two, and I believe there's a microphone someplace. Yes, sir.
Can you all hear me?
I'll repeat it, so.
Republicans have had Congress for, 6 of the last 8 years. There's any number of issues that they ran on that they said they would do, repeal Obamacare,
Right.
right down the list. Why is it that none of those no legislation was passed?
Great question. This is getting to why we're so frustrated. We worked so hard to get these different members elected. And if you look at the last 6 years, what have we gotten from our Republican Congress? What have we gotten from the Republican Senate? Remember, we take the Senate back, all these awesome things that will happen. Nothing's really happening. This is why I get back to the importance of the House Freedom Caucus, because that's our bridgehead. If those folks are stronger, they will set the tone for leadership. But right now, leadership looks and they're picking them off one by one. So there's no incentive to listen to these guys. So the other thing, I didn't have time to get into this, but as a movement, we spend a lot of time talking about politics, right? We spend a lot of time talking about principles. We never talk about process. And one thing I've realized is that our opponents, both in the conservative movement, like the old GOP guard, and the progressives, they know process. So even when we win, since they have their hands on the control of the process, like the Joint Committee on Taxation, why do we not get fundamental tax reform? Because the IRS has its own committee in Congress. Why don't we blow that committee up? There's no reason to have that committee. That's a process question, and that's a harder one that we need to start getting better at. Otherwise, I think our movement will continue to be in retreat.
I guess kind of combination question statement, and I agree with you. I think that we do need a vision. Mm-hmm. The Bible says where there is no vision, the people perish. Mm-hmm. So I think the messaging side of this, if you listen to a Democrat, you can turn on any media source, any Democrat, and they repeat the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And when you listen to a Republican, you hear 20 different things. The second thing we have is we have a lot of anger. But we have not been able to channel that anger into action. And the problem with that is we have all this anger, all this frustration, but nowhere to go. And I think that we have a lot of conservatives that have misdirected their anger. Whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump, your anger at each other, your anger at the Libertarian Party. And I think what all of us in this room, or most of us in this room, are angry at the Republican establishment. And we're angry at Mitch McConnell. And we're angry at the deal making. And we're angry at the betrayal. We're angry at being crushed. We're angry at seeing Tea Party people get eliminated in Republican primaries, right? So we're angry at all these things. But what do we do? Where do we go? And in my mind, the only vision that we have is to say that we have to begin to formulate at the state parties at the states. And we got to be able to help the states see the vision that they have the voice, that they have the control, right? That they have the ability to limit a federal government. But at that point, we also have to be able to lay the groundwork, in my mind, for a conservative third party. And that is where I believe my vision is. That is where I believe we need to go. That is what I believe that we need to do. And that gives conservatives an ability to go and to be able to channel their anger that they have, number one, at the right place, to get on message that we need to restore the message to the states and to the people in the grassroots, and for the states to exercise that voice over the federal government, and then to begin the process to put constitutional conservatives in state legislators, state senates that will be able to exercise that authority over the federal government.
My quick response to that is that my third party are the House conservatives. Those are the people that I want to put our energy into supporting, because you talk about being let down. The people who've never let me down tend to be the Mike Lees, the Dave Bratts. And they all tend to clump together in the same place. And what I just want to make sure that we don't do, because we could all get very frustrated, I just don't want to fracture the movement to the point that the progressives just have a straight shot at the quarterback forever. And I think part of that is you have to have the right blocking and tackling, and yeah, it's almost football season, so I'm a little distracted, but this is why, if there's one thing you're hearing me say, please pay attention to what's happening in some of these House races. I think a lot of our long-term battles are going to be won and lost there. So I think I'm getting my hook now? Well, I have to give up the stage, so I do appreciate it, and thank you very much.